The Blockbard Books, published by the Blockbard Group. The Blockbard Group, Canada, Ranch Estates Road, Northwest, T3G 104, Calgary, Alberta, Canada. www.theblockbard.com. First published in 2020. This edition published in the Blockbard Books Self-Help Series 2021. First published in English. Version number 1. Copyright Mackenzie Andres 2020. Editing and revisions copyright Jessica Arndt 2020. All rights reserved. Except in the United States of America, this book is sold subject to the condition that it shall not, by way of trade or otherwise, be lent, resold, hired out, or otherwise circulated without the publisher's prior consent in any form of binding or cover other than that in which it is published, and without similar condition being imposed on the subsequent publisher. ISBN 979-859-328-18121. Table of Contents. Habit number 1, stay productive. Habit number 2, love your work. Habit number 3, just do it. Habit number 4, become a listener. Habit number 5, go the extra mile. Habit number 6, visualize your victory. Habit number 7, learn from the experts. Habit number 8, hold yourself high. Habit number 9, write it down. Habit number 10, speak musically. Reading lists and sources, self-improvement classics, literary classics. A simple but effective strategy for success, the ultimate guide to growing, leading, and managing your life and businesses. Preface. You can achieve success in anything that you do, and this little book will show you how. Anytime I catch myself worrying about my performance, I relate back to these principles and analyze exactly where and in what areas I am lacking. These principles, or habits as I like to call them, aren't merely my opinions on the subject, but they are developed personally and from past experiences. I relate each one to my story and give easy examples on how you too can implement them in your life, just like I do. These habits, all but their order, have been adopted from the lives of the best leaders, philanthropists, artists, creators, CEOs, managers, and all other people of irrefutable and sometime influence. Together, these habits form a strategy far more powerful than the sum of their parts. The habits laid out in these next few pages could easily extend into a lengthy novel topping thousands of words, but I know that time is valuable, and I too know that many of these tactics are rendered useless unless they are implemented alongside a structured disciplinary strategy. This is that strategy. The strategy for success outline will help you organize the responsibility you feel toward improving the lives of both yourself and those around you. It will teach you the importance of faith, self-inventory, confidence, planning, communicating, relationships, and more. It will teach you how to manifest those traits in your daily life, and I'm not kidding, in your dreams. Think of your mind as a camera, and you the master photographer. We are going to be training our subconscious mind for the next, rest of our lives. Most people are aware that when things come in a picture from out of the blue, they come from the subconscious mind and make their way forward into the foreconscious, or regular conscious. But what if I told you that there was a way to manufacture your own subconscious thoughts by reversing this process? By bringing the visualizations in the forefront of your mind to the back of it. Almost like getting a snapshot taken with a very expensive camera, your brain, by a very renowned photographer, you. Once the photographer has taken that photo, and they will have to take several, depending on your level of skill, they will take multiple snaps of the same image from different angles until that picture thought has manifested its reality as a part of your mind, then soul, and finally body. Habit number 1, stay productive. I was going to call this habit stay proactive, as per Stephen R. Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but found stay productive to be better fitting. Why? First of all, let's come to an understanding of the definitions, and then their respective differences. As adjectives, the difference between proactive and productive is that proactive is acting in advance to deal with an expected change or difficulty, while productive is capable of producing something, especially in abundance, fertile. Being proactive is no doubt harder than being productive because almost none of us have the intuitive, insightful knowledge of the wise and shamanistic oracles, but everyone does have the ability to produce in one area or another, and studies show that when we produce successfully, we are all the more happy for it. We can have our heads hit the pillows at the end of the day in gratitude and leisure. We can eat our meals with pleasure and without distraction. We can bask in the conversations of today, all the while being proud of what we have done, what we are going to do, and what we can do. Proactivity is the opposite of reactivity, meaning you react before the reaction is even stimulated. Quite often, this can take years of foresight and possessive skills in a certain industry to achieve. Productivity, however, is simply the opposite of being lazy, and no one has ever accomplished their dreams by being lazy. And if you are reading this book, I can already tell, you are not that lazy. Lazy people don't read books about how to achieve their dreams. They don't even watch YouTube videos on how to do it. Over the years, I've tricked myself to, when feeling lazy, read or at the very least, put on a lecture or educational video. When you stay productive, you not only accomplish more tasks, you attend to those tasks more attentively. You enjoy them more, and you feel better about yourself overall. The benefits of staying productive. When I was fresh into the workforce, I found myself anxious and too tired to get out of bed. I would ask myself, what am I doing with my life? Where is my life going? The world had led me to believe, or maybe it was the Will Smith movie, The Pursuit of Happiness, that the pursuit of happiness was the key to, well, happiness. And above all things that I strive for, happiness was the most prominent. And all the classes that I skipped, all the fast food that I binged, and all the parties that I crashed with my friends, all of those things made me happy. Until one day they didn't. Those feelings of pleasure when my dopamine would spike and delayed gratification had all but left my reality, or mayhaps it was really me, myself, that had left my reality in pursuit of a happiness, wherein I had depleted my happiness so much that all that was left was a miserable and happyless wreck. The jobs in which I served but mediocrely. The tasks in which I partook terribly, if at all. I remember telling my gym teacher one time I couldn't run in football because it was leg day, and back then bodybuilding was the only thing I took seriously. If only I would have applied that same admiration, open-mindedness, and passion in other areas of my life sooner. Throughout my scouring the work industry for a niche that I could actually stand to work in longer than 6 months, I found the only thing keeping me underlyingly together and as a whole was my consistency in the efforts at the local YMCA. I had managed to gain 30 pounds of muscle while setting PRs, personal records I still, to this day, haven't broken. This includes squatting just over twice my weight for repetitions, doing 300 push-ups a day, and so on. But I'm only telling you this because if I hadn't been successful, at least to my own standards, and comparing myself to my previous self, in at least that one category, I would not have had the motivation or even potential to set goals and then achieve them in any other category of my life. By getting up and going to the gym every day, I had already begun my journey to the path of patience, self-discipline, honest inquiry, motivation, persistence, and other similar traits one might call virtues. By staying productive, I was able to gather and grow my ideas until they began cultivating themselves inside of me, and as a part of me, first mentally and then physically, as a manifest of the law of attraction. Quote, if you don't know where you are going, any road will get you there. Unquote. Lewis Carroll. Habit number 2, love your work. This is for people who have already found or feel as if they are close to finding something that makes them happy, something they love. I have no advice for the person who does not pursue what he or she truly loves, except go find it. It took me many years with multiple careers and positions in different industries, from fry cook to landscape to construction work to door-to-door sales to freelancing, all before finding out I could pretty much make a living doing what I had been doing my entire life, writing. Quote, he who does not love his work cannot expect others to love it for him. Unquote. Andres. When you love and admire your work, and I mean down to the core, it resonates with a sort of energy intangible, but quite recognizable to the human spirit. Some call this energy happiness, others call it passion. Known by many names, it is one of those special life forces no manner of money could ever buy. And though you cannot see it with the human eye, its force is a contagion that affects the very souls of those it touches, in a most positive reflection. Every person you can think of who has a significant level of influence in their field has gotten there by putting forth persistent and passionately productive principles. When baked together, these principles can form a harmonious orchestra of visions, and form together a cake called obsession. The only way to give it your all, in business or the cultivation of any talent, is to become obsessed. Obsession is not only prescribing you with acute focus, but it employs your subconscious to work for you even when you are asleep, brushing your teeth, or eating cereal. Bill Gates didn't get rich by being smart, nor did he get rich by being lucky. He got rich by helping people. Everyday people like you and I get access to a technology only the largest corporations in the world at the time could afford. Gates made that technology accessible to the everyday user, and he integrated it with the latest user-friendly technologies and extensions. He wasn't selling fancy, high-performance technology, he was selling everyday use and ease of access. In the 90s, the MacBook was a far better product than the PC, but while Apple, with Steve Jobs, had made it their goal to manufacture the best computer with the most patented technology, Microsoft focused its efforts on making software for the everyday user, and by the late 1990s, they had dominated and held over 90% of the market. Quote, "People don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care." Unquote. Theodore Roosevelt. How did old Bill manage to do this? By understanding what his target market wanted and needed. By understanding how important his work was. By listening to them. See strategy number 4. And loving his work. The benefits of loving your work. The benefits of loving your work. When you love your work with a passion immeasurable, it shows in everything you do. The projects you create, the goals you set, the conversations you have, the decisions you undertake, all become recognizable and coherent in their message. Even a door-to-door salesman selling the worst product in the world knows he must believe in this product if he is even to sell just one. Could you imagine being approached by some stranger at a time unannounced, only to have him look you in the soul with his words and say, "This product is crap"? You would tell him to get lost. You'd even be angry that it wasted your time. On the other hand, what if someone approached you out of the blue with a product or opportunity that would make your life better, either by taking care of your problems you already have, saving you time, making you look better, or fulfilling any other sort of deep-set desires? You would at least have to stop and consider, right? As long as that person came off as sincere. Quote, "Sincerity cannot exist where there is self-doubt." Unquote. Andres. This is why so many philosophers accept the doctrines of religion, because if you refuse to stand for something, you die for nothing. I'll repeat that, quote, "If you refuse to stand for something, you die for nothing." Unquote. Colin George. Now, I don't advise you to go lying to yourself about your crap product being valuable, if it's not. But people don't believe in something with true faith unless and until that something has proven to them its use and efficacy. If you have to sell crap, at the very least, look where it is not crap and run with that. There are many verses in the Bible that atheists like to take out of context and use to disprove the likelihood of a God or such a being ever existing. But the reality is that whether your perception of God exists or not, the very perception of a God affects your reality and that of those around you. This is why Jehovah's Witnesses are so good at door-to-door and smile with every rejection, because they know in their heart that what they are doing they believe is right, and they sell the good word because they actually believe it can help you. Quote, "Believe in yourself before you expect others to believe in you." Unquote. Andres. Love your work. Habit number 3. Just do it. While an extremely popular Nike slogan and a market campaign from 1987, let's take a look at what makes these words so powerful. Let's start by listing some connotations of the phrase. Just do it. No one cares what you do. Just do it. It's better to beg forgiveness than ask permission. Just do it. You only live once. YOLO. Just do it. Action beats thoughts. Just do it. Get off your ass. This habit aligns itself directly with one's ego, Greek ethos, and one's ego aligns itself relatively with their self-discipline. Mind you, ego in this sense is not hubris, but mere confidence, and the more disciplined you have been in your field's past performance, the more confident you will be in your future executions of such performances. You've probably heard before the cliche, if you want something done right, do it yourself, right? Well, let's take a look at this a little further. If you want something done the way you want, at the time that you wish, do it yourself. Don't let yourself fall behind on tasks of productivity, whether personal or business, because of some bureaucratic delays, whether it's taking too long to reply to emails, or a court dispute you're unfit to fight alone, or any other injustices put upon you by mayhaps your own doing, but nonetheless feel are perhaps out of your own current power to fix. I'm not going to spend too long telling tales of my own examples, but once there was a time when I had failed to mention a $300 job in my tax return. It was for an extremely unprofessional company I had no idea at the time would claim it. A year later, upon doing my tax returns, I found myself penalized with a $12,900 fine to the CRA, the Canadian IRS. I ended up sending them a letter stating the situation and its reality, and then a second about how attacked I felt for this fine of almost $13,000 for my failure to mention $300 earned from a company I felt had no safety standards. They were not moved at all. It wasn't until my third letter, when I used some Carnegie-style rhetoric and almost made them feel bad about my situation, that I was finally granted clemency and exempted from a $13,000 fine. That was a big win, in my mind. I saw firsthand the power of effective speaking, or rather, writing, which is easier for most people, as there is little chance of saying impulsive things you don't actually mean. But on the other hand, there is more chance of people taking your words directly out of context and into their own hands, thoughts. But can you blame them? You and I do the exact same thing. We all do. This is why the late United States President Abraham Lincoln's hate letter technique is so famous. I first heard of it from Family Guy, the TV show, as I did the first of many things, and thought to myself at the time, what a preposterous technique to fuel your hate. It was only upon reading Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, after looking up on Google the #1 book in the world to read, that I found the true power of Honest Abe's hate letter technique. If you have not heard of it, the basis goes like this. Write a letter, text, or message addressed to whom you hate, with regards as to why you hate them or what they do. Include in it why you hate, dislike them, or are displeased with this person, and once you are finished, simply throw the letter in the trash or erase the message. Yep, that's right, don't send it. You will have already expelled from your soul the inner anger which was holding you back and eating away at your chance of achieving your inner peace that you know your ego says you deserve. And you've managed to do so without bringing harm to another soul or spirit. The benefits of just doing it. Just doing it allows you less time for your brain to come up with the rational reasons as to why it shouldn't be done or why you don't need to do it. Just doing it keeps your mind and body in a flow state of performance and focus. Just doing it forces others to see you as a leader who gets things done. Just doing it affects all areas of your life in a positive way. Even if you have no clue where to start or what your life's calling is, you will find that the power of infinite intelligence guides the ideas and lives of those who just do it. Habit number 4. Become a listener. Quote, to sell John Brown what John Brown buys, you must see the world through John Brown's eyes. Unquote. Unknown. This little quote couldn't be more true today than it was when it was written. Becoming a great listener will benefit you in more than just sales. However, to become a great listener, you must first become a listener. Becoming a listener reaps its benefits in such areas of your life as leadership, management, friendships, relationships, and so many more. Let's see how. To truly see the world through John Brown's eyes, your ideal customer, you must listen attentively to what John Brown has to say. Quote, people don't buy what your product does, they buy what it does for them. Unquote. M.L. Andres. Dale Carnegie's bestseller, How to Win Friends and Influence People, alludes to the fact that a person's name is to that person the sweetest sound in the world. Make an extra effort to remember the name of every new person you meet. If it is pronounced differently, then ask for clarification, or perhaps how to spell it. When you get someone's name right and say it sincerely, you then have that person's full attention. You can now use their full attention to ask them a question you're genuinely interested in, and then let them do an equal amount, if not all, of the talking that you do. What you will find is that if you are not only actually interested in what they have to say, but that even you who consider it to be the most basic of persons knows something that you do not. Use what you learn and add it to your arsenal of strategic thinking. The brain is excellent at retaining what it needs and deleting what it doesn't. Like a supercomputer, it saves things in your subconscious to retrieve later, when you need it the most. Once you've manifested your goals as subconscious visions of reality, then your brain immediately begins working on taking what it is necessary, what it needs. This includes what you learn from every conversation you have, to build your dreams into real thoughts and ideas. Becoming a listener takes humility, takes respect. Both traits are something one must develop and cultivate continuously if they wish to remain intuitive and ahead in this world of who's got the bigger ego. The benefits of becoming a good listener. When you listen well, you will gain more friends. You will gain more insight into good decision making. You will be less likely to say something incorrect or inappropriate when you spend more time listening than speaking. And not because you are thinking harder when the person is speaking to you, for that is not real listening. In general, people tend to listen to their own thoughts during a conversation, and they fumble around with their own sentences to find which to say for when the speaker finally finishes speaking. This is not real listening. It is not only rude and easily read by the other person, but also the most unproductive form of conversation having as well. This is because our brain stops thinking. It doesn't want to lose its train of thought before the other person finishes talking, and thus it remains at a standstill. The person speaking realizes you're no longer listening, and they feel this, whether they admit to it or not, as some sort of disservice or dishonor. They might think to themselves, why do I talk anyway if no one ever listens? Do you really think they're going to listen to you after the way you just made them feel? Even if they pretend to, they won't hear anything. They're not really listening, just as you were not really listening to them. The golden rule of Christianity is, treat others the way you wish to be treated, or do unto others what you would have done unto you. I think we can take this a step further by realizing everyone has different standards of treatment, and not only by designating our efforts to the understanding of those standards of others can we bring people true value and happiness in their lives. So, if not for the sake of your own personal progress, but that of those around you, become a great listener. Encourage people to talk about themselves, and in turn, it will encourage people to see you as you see yourself, as a leader of the conversation. Remember that the person who asks the questions holds the power in the conversation. When you encourage others to talk about themselves, they start to glow and emit a light of passion that they couldn't have sparked by themselves, or didn't realize they even had sometimes. They will almost always remember that moment when they talked passionately about something they believed in, and associate it, whether consciously or subconsciously, with your friendship and leadership. Become a great listener. Habit number 5, go the extra mile. I remember when I was working my entry-level construction jobs, during site cleanups and other activities, I would go a little overboard in making sure everything was neat, tidy, organized, and looking good. My friends and coworkers saw this as a try-hard, suck-up-to-your-boss type attitude. They felt offended or threatened by me for just doing what I felt I was being paid to do. They found it unnecessary. I found it fun. I thought I was just running the clock till the workday was over, and because I knew I'd rather do anything than nothing. But the truth I realize now is that I simply love to serve people and make them happy. It's okay to dig a hole too deep for yourself at the bottom if you know there's gold or something. But do not expect in return for your services anything special or value. This can only lead to disappointment, resentment, and you not wanting to go above and beyond in your efforts ever again. This you must avoid at all costs. This habit can, and most definitely should, be done in all areas of your life, from the pile of paperwork that you've been meaning to let go, or that project in your backyard you still want to finish, those numbers you need to crunch, the room that still needs tidying, or the meal that your family wants that could be delivered just a tad bit more deliciously. At work, you can go the extra mile by simply doing this, giving more or performing better than that which you are paid for. How you can give more. If you are in e-commerce, this is offering a free item to customers on top of their first purchase and a discount code for the next time they buy. If you are in fitness, this is offering a free training program and checking in with your clients as often as possible because you sincerely care. Even if you don't care about one person, you care about what you are doing, and care is passion. Passion equals motivation, and motivation equals success. Of course, only when it's being well prepared for a few face-offs with failure. If you are a restaurant, this is hiring exceptional servers and front-of-house staff, as well as cooks and chefs. They must both be orientated and familiar with the message of your restaurant. They must feel at home, like they are a part of a family with a unified cause. Also, you can go the extra mile by checking in regularly with the customer and make them feel as if they too are at home. If you are a salesperson, this is giving extraordinary customer service and throwing in the cherry on top every time. Salespeople are the best at making friends because they go the extra mile when it comes to getting to know someone. If you are in construction, this is doing it right the first time, whatever the task might be, and asking questions as thoroughly as possible so that you can do it right the first time. I hope you get the gist of it. The benefits of going the extra mile. No one has ever achieved greatness or success in the levels of extremity we are talking about by merely being average, or putting out average work. They set their goals high, higher than the sky, higher than any other person has done before them. And they never take advice from people who haven't been to the places they are going, which is in most cases very few, or no one if your dreams have never been accomplished, or perhaps even thought of by anyone before you. Quote, an interesting thing about success is that it's like a breath of air. Although your last breath of air is important, it's not nearly as important as the next one. Unquote. Grant Cardone. Going the extra mile puts you on terms with your conscience, good terms, that cultivate themselves just as any other habit would when practiced regularly. Accept this habit. Once you've started the foundations on which it builds upon, it makes you feel better about yourself on a deeper subconscious level that in itself is reward enough. Moreover, you will see how happy the people you serve will be when you serve them well. When you go above and beyond, and you do so with a good attitude. If your job doesn't allow you to serve in those 3 ways, first, by serving your subconscious positively, second, by serving others without need for reward, and lastly, without rewarding yourself, although this is definitely the least important, then you need to find a new niche before the hole you are digging for yourself gets too deep. Strategy number 6. Visualize your victory. Take Mahatma Gandhi, for example, an all too famous expert in this field of discipline. The planes of leadership and influence were indeed his domain. Gandhi had no money, no position of title, and no strength with which he could overpower other men. Some would even say that Gandhi had nothing when compared to our more Western leaders of a numerous capital and all-commanding office, but his influence eclipses that of any other person in his century. He wrested British power from the likes of India using a force His Majesties never even knew existed before its implementation. By this so-called prophet of peace, nobody, this lawyer-turned-starved man. Gandhi cleared his mind absolutely of any doubt that he would eventually win the freedom of the Indian people. He did this by, number 1, staying productive. By not stopping for a single day, he achieved what he desired, whether locked in a prison cell or speaking to millions. He attained his integrity by putting foot one fourth after the other, and getting straight up after he had fallen down. Number 2, he loved his work, sticking to it through so many years of turmoil and temptation to turn from the righteous path. Number 3, he just did it. Could you imagine the scorn he got from others, including his friends and family, when he first announced his plan? Oh boy, did he prove them wrong, and I would hope to their gratitude, by just doing it, because so many others wouldn't. Number 4, becoming a listener. He didn't have to listen hard to know the people of India wanted self-rulership and freedom from British monarchy, but he had to listen to why what they were doing currently wasn't working, and to what his people's hearts, and not their voices, were really saying, before he could even hope to get the people on the opposite side to listen to him. Number 5, he went the extra mile, or 1.6 kilometers, because India was still a British colony. No one asked Gandhi to spend his life the way he did. No one paid him for it, and he definitely wasn't thinking in terms of his personal interest. He went 400 million miles extra, some might say, because his plan was to benefit the lives of some 400 million people. Number 6, he visualized his victory. Gandhi had faith that his plan would work because he had seen it work for himself in his own dreams and visions of the future. This faith allowed him to be guided by a power far greater than himself, the power of infinite intelligence. The benefits of visualizing your victory. I don't remember the exact study off by heart, but I remember hearing from one of the many books I have read about a study that took place proving scientifically the effects of this technique. The variable was which team could sink the most basketball baskets, and after controlling it as well as they could, they got half the team to visualize themselves draining threes and sinking baskets as much as they could the night before, while the other team simply showed up the next day. Which team do you think performed better the next day on the court? The ones who visualized their victories, or the ones who just showed up? I'll let you conclude that hypothesis for yourself, or find it on the internet if you want to learn more. Habit number 7, learn from the experts. What can we learn from the experts of our fields, the experts in our hobbies, the experts of all time? I said to myself a long time ago, whether consciously or not, that I wanted to spend less time admiring the people I so adored and looked up to, and more time trying to be like them. But in this process of this, I didn't want to lose myself. Creativity and personality is what gives each person their individual edge. That is just basic biology. Or is it? The sciences discuss the physical world. Where in the physical world can we locate creativity and personality? We might discuss them as being part of the individual, or being inside an individual, but there is no organ or bodily part the natural sciences can measure, that is, our creativity or personality. This is a metaphysical statement, but the biological tendency to be different, which one might call creativity, is individualistic, and very much a product of the materials about which you surround yourself with. When I first found I could change my biology, oh boy, was that a change. I was a chubby kid my whole life, and then in my last years of high school, I became a regular gym goer. Today I don't go as much as I did back then, or as much as I'd like to, but even when I hit the gym for just 45 minutes a day, 3 days a week, and then sit on my ass writing and calling clients the rest of the time, I noticed that most of my lean muscle mass or gym body is here to stay. This is in part because one earns the majority of their muscle mass in the first few years of lifting weights, but it mostly owes its dues to the fact that habits compound over time. Habits are contagious. If you open your mind to the answers you are searching for, they will come and fit in place like a child's shape toy. Experts have always had their message told, even before the times of common literacy. This can be seen everywhere throughout every culture's history. A great example, and reason people are still reading it 2,800 years after its original publishing, can be found in Homer's story, the Iliad, of Achilles, expert warrior, Hector, expert brave man, Patroclus, expert friend, Paris, expert lover. Priam, expert father. And many other popular traits the ancients incarnated and associated through metaphor and story, conveying with humanity's expertise the eloquence that resonates and follows the admiration of such a people and their admirers. But admiration simply isn't enough. One must work hard at training themselves if they wish to bear the traits of their heroes, and in turn receive admirers of their own. There is an expert in every field you choose to traverse. Go and follow them. The benefits of following the leader, aka learning from the experts. The main difference between being a leader and being a martyr is that a leader walks beside his people throughout their change, like Moses in the desert, Napoleon in the Alps, King Leonidas at Thermopylae, and several other examples of great leaders walking, fighting, and living directly beside their people throughout history. Whereas a martyr walks directly ahead of his or her people, like Joan of Arc, Jesus Christ, or Mahatma Gandhi. Being a martyr is great and extremely powerful, but of course, you must first die, so we will stick with being a leader and how to hone and establish that leadership for this example. To be a leader, you must walk ahead of them ever so slightly so they can see where you are going, but not so far that you lose sight of your people, because a leader is not a leader without his or her people. And you must also walk beside them so that they know how you are there, and they can participate with you and interact with you on their journey. And lastly, you must also walk behind them to guide their path, and like a shepherd does his sheep, keep them on the right path. This is what John C. Maxwell, America's expert on leadership, calls the leadership dance. You must walk in front as an example, beside as a friend, and behind as a leader, to watch the people you empower grow. Strategy number 8. Hold yourself high. When it comes to your goals, never take no for an answer. You've probably heard the tale of Thomas Edison trying to create the light bulb 999 times and getting it right on the 1000th. Do you think we would have the light bulb today if there wasn't a man as stubborn as this to conduct his trials and error? Or even attempt to do something that has never been done? Who knows how long it would have been before another audacious person with a dream and background in science, industry, business, and illumination came along and attempted what Thomas had. Do you think Mr. Edison would have tried his experiment 1,000 times if he hadn't already seen it work in his dreams, visions, and/or notations? Probably not. Do you think he would have even attempted his experiments if he didn't already think himself some genius tinkerer? Probably not. Quote, "The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man." Unquote. George Bernard Shaw's Man and Superman. There is another battle we all, within ourselves, face. We've covered the contrasting relationship and battle between consciousness and subconsciousness, but the battle between mind and heart, or body, mind, and soul, heart, is another one we must become well aware of if we are to begin facing its encumbrance. We must become more valuable to ourselves if we wish to become more valuable to other people. Valuable people create, give, care, make, they manifest, and they motivate everyone around them 100 times more effectively than people with little to no value. And no one in the world truly has no value except for the person who thinks themselves valueless, thereby and thus rendering their value useless. Your future self is begging you to put in the work today. It is begging you not only to just hold on for tomorrow, but to eat for tomorrow. Everything you spend your time doing affects how your brain thinks, and in turn affects who you are. Your greatest enemy is yourself. If you are to help people, you must help yourself. And to do this, you must conquer yourself. You must become a master at the battle between your mind and heart, body and soul, or at the very least, begin your apprenticeship. This training takes place in every decision that you make. Hone it. Become a master. The benefits of holding yourself high. Every story about every person I have named so far, in those stories of influence, leadership, and heroism, have one thing in common. They all held themselves high. But the next story is about a person who held themselves so high that other people around him didn't even have time to think about themselves at all. This man sat in jail contemplating why some people had money while others didn't. He grew bitter in his thinking and came out with a book about his life. This book disclosed the very thoughts and intentions he had developed in that cynical state of being, and it was later acted upon, to the misery of millions. This very act of thought changed him for the rest of his life. Around 10 years later, this man's thinking had already set Europe up in flames, and was beginning to affect even the Americas. This man was Adolf Hitler, and he was able to use his power so destructively because he disallowed people around him from using theirs constructively. By the time he finally gained federal power, there was scarcely a person left who would dare say no to him. Such was the power of his thinking that through years of mass rhetoric and propaganda, the people surrounding him lost the power to think for themselves. When Hitler's soldiers, or the ones who were caught, were finally brought to trial in Nuremberg, 1945 to 1949, their number one excuse from their mouths was, "I was obeying my sovereign's orders." What a pitiful excuse for any person of commanding office or leadership to use. No? People who think of themselves highly, know when to listen to someone else above them. They even know when to listen to someone who might be in some natures below them, but they never listen to someone who contradicts or undermines their intrinsically subconscious values of human dignity, morality, standards, and compassion. In fact, the Nazi soldiers that did make it to trial were convicted because the jury found them guilty entirely on the basis that people are free-willed human beings capable of making decisions for themselves. They weren't forced to commit genocide. The court might not have taken into account the years of threats and psychological terrors implicated on them, but then again, neither did the Nazis, or they would have left, like Albert Einstein. He would have made a terrible Nazi anyway. But, in all seriousness, at the young age of 17, renouncing his German citizenship, he made for the Americas and ended up aiding in the Manhattan Project, then producing the world's first nuclear weapons, all to avoid conscription, mandatory army service. And the only people who bear these values are people who cultivate them through habit over time, whether willingly or unwillingly, consciously or subconsciously, knowingly or unknowingly. These aforementioned values are not born unto us naturally, they are intrinsic in the sense that their learning is inevitable, but the degree of their learning is as competitive as the wild plains of Africa and nature itself. They are first taught to us by teachers, leaders, parents, and all other people who have affected the very way we think. Habit number 9. Write it down. Write things down right when they come across your mind. Be specific. Nothing is worse than having a great idea or thought you had, only to remember the idea was a great one. Nothing more. Writing it down will prevent you from saying, "What was that great idea I had again?" Write it down in a notebook for important things, and organize it in categories, depending on your needs. When you're on the go, you can use a Notes app. They are quick to use and easy to organize. Also, I use Google Phone Calendar synced across my platforms, and color-coordinated sticky notes when I am at my desk. When my sticky notes start to build up and look cluttered, I know I've had too many unacted upon ideas of late, and it is time to act before I become overwhelmed. I go through them, checking for things like feasibility and importance, return and influence. I discard some and implement an execution plan for others. Quote, "Most people don't even remember their ideas, let alone act on them." Unquote. Andres. If you can write down your thoughts and ideas, it will not only help you remember them, but it will help you to formulate a plan to execute them. If you are able to do this, you will already be ahead of 80% of society who sees their dreams and ambitions as too far-fetched. If you can, stay productive, love your work, just do it, become a listener, go the extra mile, visualize your victory, learn from the experts, hold yourself high, and write it down. Then you have the world at your fingertips. The mind is bombarded with far too many ideas on a day-to-day basis for us not to write down the good ones. The benefits of writing it down. You've probably heard that Albert Einstein forgot his own phone number. I don't know the validity of this statement, but it no doubt alludes to his inner genius. Otherwise, it would have never been rumored. He didn't remember because he probably had it written down to free his mind for more important thoughts. Your brain, like a computer, computes faster when it has less junk stored in its hard drive. Your processing power goes up. Albert Einstein probably knew less facts than the average Joe you see on today's Jeopardy, but he knew how to think. Which do you think is more important? Especially in today's age, where everyone has a literal encyclopedia in their pockets and are quite usually none the smarter for it. Now, I am no Albert Einstein, but I know if I have a less important phone call or appointment, let's say anything that I'm not particularly excited for, and I have to write it down in my calendar, as well as a reminder if I want any hopes of remembering. This frees my mind from contemplating more trivial tasks and allows it to focus its energy on being creative and having more progressive thinking. I once heard from a well-versed person on the matter that if an idea is good enough, it will be remembered regardless. This might be an excellent example of how to implement the less is more principle when you have what a doctor calls attention deficit disorder, ADD, or even a mind like mine with constant thoughts and ideas coming at you from every single angle. Sometimes you've got to let those ideas hit you in the face and then write down their names for later. Find out which one is the biggest and which one will take the most effort to conquer. Then, when you've come up with your plan, you start to see which names, ideas, were bullshit anyway. This isn't to say you should let people hit you in the face and then write down their names for later vengeance. I only mean that your ideas have the power to beat you up. Someone else's ideas don't have that power unless you give it to them. And when you've made the choice to live a meaningful and valuable life, that's not the type of power you are giving out to people. Instead of giving them power over you, you are empowering them to have power over themselves. And that's powerful. Habit number 10. Speak musically. Become a thoughtful speaker. Quote, "The only thing perfect man has created is music." Unquote. Unknown. When you speak as if the muse, the Greek goddesses of art themselves, are speaking through you and into the souls of those whom, having been hit with your words, find easily the music hidden within its context. When you make an effort, nay, a decision to speak musically with your context, rest assured you'll bring as much joy to the hearts of those who heed your words as would their favorite song. When you make that decision, you will notice that you take the time to formulate words more wisely. You're less likely to say something you didn't mean, and your words aren't easily taken out of context. Your words become sincere, your sentences clear. People are more likely to listen when they see you take the time to understand their questions thoroughly, instead of just blurting out an answer or a relevant statement. They actually respect you more when you take the time to give a musical answer. But Mac, people respect their time, and they might see it as an insult if I don't reply immediately, eagerly, and restlessly. Obviously, the best time to make impulsive decisions and give answers that you have no idea how long people will remember and carry with them for is when replying to an important text, call, or email, right? Maybe not. When you take the time to hear and understand someone's questions, they see a good listener, and more importantly, a good thinker. They see someone who respects what he or she has to say, and in turn, they see someone who respects who he or she is, as well as someone who respects themselves. Think of some of the musical speakers in your life. You probably remember situations, sayings, and instances that have long been forgotten by those that said them. People remember things in which ways you and I do not, and we must remember this when speaking. We must remember that we want to be remembered for. The benefits of becoming a thoughtful speaker. Thoughtful speakers always love their work. They always listen to others, always learn from the experts, always visualize their victory, and they always hold themselves and what they have to say high. Thoughtful speaking will win you more friends, and not to mention better friends who actually care about you and in turn care about what you have to say. Quote, "No one cares about how much you know unless they know how much you care." Unquote. Theodore Roosevelt. Thoughtful speakers are the life of the party. They're the life of business meetings, work gatherings, birthday parties, baby showers, anything, you name it. Thoughtful speakers are remembered. They are remembered for thoughtful things they spoke, and thus the courageous things they've done similar to those words they spoke. Speaking musically, thoughtfully, will make others flock around you like a children's daycare during story time, only they won't be children, or even childish adults. They will be people with deep inquiries into the deeper questions they have in life. They will be people of depth, people of meaning, the exact kinds of people we mean to attract in this life, ever lived in the shallows. Thoughts and exercises. Most people work because they have to, not because they want to. Rid yourself of any thinking that you are working for money. Instead, focus on the idea that you are working to serve, and you serve because you enjoy it. People come to your service because they enjoy that you enjoy it. They give you their money, and then they tell their friends, who then line up with even more money, and that's how people get rich. People with the money-first attitude often have no money. This is because money cannot be harvested, but it can be planted. These are different. Success is stagnant. Failure is not. Success is a dead end. Failure, a hero's journey. You probably know many people who are preoccupied with reasons why they need more money, instead of utilizing that ever-limited brain space we all have with ways as to how we can make more money. This is the fault of the blind and ignorant, who don't stop to think about how others might see them. This is because they don't care. Maybe because they've been hurt by others. Whatever the reason, they view the world as if it owes them some debt the world never signed off on. And, in their mind, they build up this imaginative debt into what would almost construct as a mental legal document. It's then real to them, the idea that the world owes them something. They feel they are owed this and that, and if it isn't handed to them at their demand, like a kid with candy who of course doesn't understand how money works, or the consequences of getting too much money for free, they will take it from those who have it. Very few people choose to traverse the path of success, for it is filled with failures, hardships, calamities, but most of all, and by far the most sinister of the bunch, temptations. Temptations will entice you at every corner to stray from your dreams, temptations to be lazy, temptations to be selfish, temptations to be ignorant, inconsiderate, intolerant, and all other forms of easygoing, don't go against the grain attitudes. The importance of self-discipline. While I'm definitely not an expert in self-discipline, I cannot overlook its importance. As a creative, whom I would say is not very disciplined, I see the need to build structures in my life, sometimes and very specifically for no more of a reason than to break them, or test their rigidity. Ask my school teachers if this wasn't the case. Though I had little clue this was what I was doing at the time, I wasn't simply breaking the rules because I could, but rather felt I should, as my creative side, which is also the side I directly associated with learning, and that being fun or enjoyable, flourished every time I stepped outside of the boxes that were then schedules, classmates, friend groups, timetables, teachers, an all-around order. My point is, I would not have had a box to think outside of had the box not been created and I placed in it in the first place. Some people thrive inside of the box, others thrive on the outside. There are many boxes, and it depends on which form, kind, or archetype, repeated pattern, or box we are discussing. The law is a box that is not very beneficial to be outside of in your thinking, but again, in most cases, the people who have stepped outside of the box of law, in first, their thinking, and second, of course, their corresponding actions, have helped to make the law better, in almost every possible way. I'm not endorsing criminal behavior, although I am openly against viceless utopias, but rather showing the right found in the wrong. For example, in Canada, before 1976, wearing seatbelts wasn't seen as mandatory, so it was instead seen as optional. It took several severe tragedies and consequences from these more liberal livers of the law before mandates were put in place, making not wearing a seatbelt penalizable under the law. Sometimes, outside-of-the-box thinking is just plain stupid, like not wearing a seatbelt in a fast-moving vehicle. Other times, stupidity is necessary. I am not saying people had to die before they decided to mandate wearing a seatbelt, but in a society that has its foundations being chipped away at almost as fast as they are being built upon, do you really think the people in power would make any decisions without themselves being first affected? Another example. Red food dye is illegal in the European Union. Why? Because in all of their conclusive studies, they found it may cause cancer, while the United States has yet to find enough cancer or conclusive evidence to support such studies. Europe saw any signs of cancer from a chemical substance as an instant red flag, no pun intended, and switched all reddish dyes to a beet juice alternative. If the FDA were truly in the Department of Food, and thus overall health safety, they would see any red flags as what they were, red flags, regardless of the short-term economic effects. Likewise, if the government was truly in the business of listening and leadership, they would have seen that you can get more people to wear seatbelts by showing them the consequences of not wearing one, than by saying, hey, you kids will be in trouble if you don't wear these seatbelts, thereby becoming the archetypal resented parent. What does this have to do with discipline? If discipline is order, and order exists as these metaphysical boxes, per se, then government is a big box consisting of ordered, and thus, for the most part, disciplined individuals. And if you go outside of the box, there are consequences. It is up to you to make those consequences impact you, or perhaps others positively or negatively based on your disciplined knowing of when you are inside of the box and when you are out. Exercises taken straight from the world's elite class. While many of these principles I've given my own twist on, they are for the most part taken directly from some of the world's most successful people in their fields, and most of these fields are the fields of success. They have literally become successful by making other people successful. Otherwise, no one would go to them again, and their names would have been forgotten. Names like Tony Robbins, Napoleon Hill, Dale Carnegie, John C. Maxwell, and so on. Measure your happiness to better scale it. The best business coaches, entrepreneurs, and managers from every industry all measure the performance of different operating systems they use for one purpose: to scale them, make them grow. We can apply these same methods to our levels of happiness. The following is a performance prompt made for you so that you may more easily measure your levels of happiness in various areas of your life. Make a list of health, family, friends, relationships, missions, work, finances, adventures, hobbies, spirituality. Next to each category listed, rate your current happiness level in that area of your life on a scale of 1 to 10. Remember to do your happiness levels and not your success or progress levels, for it is important to remember that these are different things. Once you have finished listing your happiness levels honestly and thoroughly, for you're only lying to yourself if you don't, add them up and see your score out of 100. What you might be surprised to find, if you are like me, is that you aren't even close to the levels of happiness you may want to be at. Maybe in certain categories your happiness is astounding, but when I first performed this prompt, I was barely over the 50% mark, 52 to be precise. Anyone who's at 10 or even a 9 in most of these categories is lying to themselves, for even the Buddha had terrible finances, and Jesus snitched friends. Sensory vision prompt. Your emotional journey will get progressively more potent the better you envision it. Start with a specific statement, very specific. In it, you have exactly what you want to achieve, and when you want to achieve it. Then, gather some inspirational photographs of others who have achieved, or close to, whatever it is that might be. Then, you imagine and write it down, the benefits and experiences you will receive as a result of achieving your goal. Finally, bring these 3 things together in a vision rich with all its sights, smells, tastes, touches, sounds, and feelings of success. The more intense your vision is, the more it will push you. The more you bring up these visions of intensity, the faster they will push you. Give yourself credit where it is due. There are times to be hard on yourself, which I think is most of them, or at least more than half, and times to bring yourself up. You can do this by recalling and remembering your past accomplishments. This is not to brag to others, but rather to bring yourself up and back in line with both your newer and higher standards. You often see people from the hip-hop scene iced out in bling, or, for the less hip-hop orientated audiences, wearing flashy jewelry. Some of them do this to show off for the public, or a new video or photo shoot, and in that case it is often fake and is usually as big as possible. But in many cases, that chain or ring is a symbol of that person's success, especially when they came from a not-so-fortunate or successful background, childhood. They wear it every day as a symbol of remembrance as to where they came from, both to humble them with past humility and grace them with future empowerment. Remember your past achievements. Remember your past accomplishments. Remember your past praises. Remember your past successes. Remember them all, and continue to raise the bar just a little bit each time. The only reason you are remembering them, unless you are really feeling down, is to remember and realize why you can and will accomplish more. The only time in your life you should lower the bar is during a limbo. And even then, I could argue that is still more or less raising the bar.